Welcome, everyone, back to the Rise Above Heartless Materialism podcast. We've had a bit of an extended break. Had some medical things to work through, and fortunately, they seem to be on the positive swing. So here we are again with my friend Laurence Gonzaga, who is a behavioral health. I always get your titles mixed up because you're a behavioral health teacher.
Well, my main job is I'm a program manager for healthcare for behavioral health. So I do administration type stuff for healthcare in general. So there is the therapy there. I don't do therapy. I'm not a therapist, but that's my main job. And then on the side, which is when you add up all the hours, it's another full-time job, I guess you can say, is I'm an adjunct professor of psychology and child development. So,
Right.
But that's not my main thing. A lot of people assume that's my main thing because I talk about that a lot. But
right, yeah, I keep forgetting the. I knew you had multiple positions. I just forgot the administrative one. So anyway,
that's not as sexy as the academic job. That's the reason why.
It's a much more conservative job, nuts and bolts, one of those jobs that if it wasn't performed, civilization would just collapse and crumble.
That's right. It's all the background stuff, right? I mean, you think about the movie stars and stuff like that. Oh, well, it's the lighting folks, it's the wardrobe folks that don't get their praises.
Well, it's everything, It all comes into play. I know I get really upset with some colorists who are like, well, it doesn't matter how you color, it's just how it's shot, and, or they say with Technicolor, like, well, Technicolor just came from the wardrobe and the lighting and the makeup, and I'm just like, yeah, that's part of it, but there's definitely a process, the actual act of soaking film in dyes does something to it that a digital camera doesn't do in the same way. So please don't tell me that it's just it's the same thing, with film. Like, the film is multiple communication mediums working together, and you take one away, and you still got a film, I guess. But I would argue though that, like, you take acting away, it's almost pointless. I mean, unless you're making like a surrealistic film or a nature film, poetic nature film. Aside from those fringe categories, you take away the actors, or you don't really have a movie.
You don't have something. Yeah, they're all important.
Well, today we are going to talk about that thing which everybody is talking about to death, which I was hoping would just blow over. It's like, as Pope Leo said, it's time to move on. But the problem is the church has not moved on, and I don't think it's going to move on for the foreseeable future. So we're going to throw our hats into the ring, and we're going to talk about the SSPX, hopefully from more of a, like, philosophical, psychological perspective, just because Laurence is probably more of a theologian than I am, but I am not a theologian. Like, I did some, a little bit of research prior to our podcast today, and it was like this back and forth with, like, one side's like, oh, well, here's all these precedents that says, like, yeah, like there's justification for the split, and then you have it's like, the whole COVID thing, like, everybody's got their own set of facts, and you're just like, the average bystander's like, if you're not, like, emotionally committed to one side, it's like, how on earth am I supposed to know which set of facts is correct? They both look equally compelling, But I want to start out with the conclusion that I came to, because there was a time earlier this year where I was genuinely afraid, like, oh, is, like, the real church, like, is the real church a counterfeit church now, and will I only be saved if I go with the SSPX? I mean, I wasn't, like, jumping in without discernment, but I had a genuine fear. I have a lot of salvation fears. That's why Larry Chapp's podcast really struck a chord when he said, oh, well, there's, like, this this tripwire. Like, what if you pick the wrong thing and then you end up in hell? But anyway, it's like, well, what if the SSPX is correct? So I did some digging, and I found that not only is there like in the state of Kansas, there was an investigation that there were 30 counts of sexual abuse committed by 15 priests. Which that in itself, like, I mean, obviously the mainstream church has plenty of that. So you might ask the question like, well, so what? It's like, well, but the SSPX claims to not have the same kind of problems that the mainstream church does. They claim to like, we have the real faith, and therefore like we don't have all the degeneracy. So in my mind, that kind of invalidates your claims a little bit. But then the other thing that really got me was all the accounts I heard of people who actually were in the SSPX, and also just digging online that there's at least there used to be a broader trend of like particularly academic disciplinary violence. So like there was one gentleman who commented on one of my Facebook posts who said he was in the SSPX, and I think he went through an SSPX school, and it was either a priest or a teacher who literally punched him in the face and knocked him out. And so I did some further research, like, okay, well, does that line up with what the church has historically done? And the answer is twofold. On the one hand, yes, in many cases, at least in the 1950s, not only did church schools, Catholic schools, have what we would consider today to be abusive forms of corporal punishment, but everybody was doing it. Like all the Protestants were doing it too, and in the ancient times, obviously the pagans were probably no different. But here's the thing. Even though that was widespreadly practiced, many of the saints tried to curb that. They prescribed that, yes, you can use corporal punishment, but typically it was only looked upon by the saints as a last resort. And even so, it had to be done with the spirit of like genuine concern for the student, and not just because you're mad because they're not falling in line. And I think it was St. John Bosco who even like completely did away with corporal punishment. He said like she should never be done. But in the 1950s, in the Catholic schools, the prevailing culture of the time, there was that sort of corporal punishment. So that makes me, just that and everything else I've kind of seen with the SSPX makes me really think, or come to the conclusion rather, that it seems like the SSPX is more concerned with taking a snapshot of Catholic history and codifying it as the full picture, rather than trying to assent to the fullness and the ideal of the Catholic faith. I was going to say something else. What was it? I was doing good, so far. Yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to say. It's kind of like with when you get your labs done, and you can have a snapshot of your blood sugar, which gives you a picture of that very specific time and your blood sugar level at that time, or you can get your A1C that shows it for average. 6 months. And so that, and I don't know if that's like 100% of an accurate portrayal, but just based on that research I did, and based on the things I've heard of the SSPX, like it seems like they're trying to do that, and there seems like an air of, maybe this is a bit judgmental of me, I'm sure not every SSPX person is that way. Like I know SSPX people who are, reasonable people, but it seems to me at least the spirit of like maybe the hierarchy is that there's this air of like pride and cruelty that goes with it, that and it comes from a pursuit of excellence. They see some of the leniencies that happened after the Second Vatican Council, and they say, oh well, there's a drop in standards, so we're going to maintain those standards, which is a good thing to maintain high standards. But I've noticed, just in my own observations in life, that the pursuit of excellence is fraught with the temptations to pride and subsequently cruelty. And now that doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue excellence. It's just that when you do, you have to be like really careful that happens. And in the fact that there's like all this sorts of abuse makes me like, is that part of that? So
yeah.
So that's my overview. And I do want to later on touch on some of like where I think the SSPX has accurate diagnosis of the church in some degree, but I'll open with that like sort of more negative view. Like so what are your
yeah.
I want to do a balanced podcast. I don't want to
sure.
like, because it's far too easy to just say, oh well, it's far too easy to treat these things like a football match where it's like, well, my team, I'm all for my team and I'm all against your team, and my team's all good and your team's all bad. Like I take the Solzhenitsyn point of view where the line of good and evil strikes down the heart of every human being.
So yeah, I think that's I mentioned it before. I think though is like if people will rely on their intuition the most. I think that they make decisions based on, I mean, thought is part of it for sure, but intuition is shaped by rationality, right? So if you go to college, then you'll be shaped by the culture and the academia and the ways of thinking of liberal professors or whatever it is, or if it's a conservative school, conservative professors, right? And then your intuitions start to shift, right? So where you might have a intuitive reaction to certain ideas before college, before your indoctrination, if you will, you would have a different response from after you go to Christendom college or the state university or something like that, because now way of thinking has been shaped in a different way. And isn't that the whole reason why people are going back to old, the great books or whatever it is? I've never been privy to, I've never been in the sphere of influence of those who have been homeschooled, really, or those who have had great books. They're very intelligent, sharp individuals, but sometimes I talk to them and I'm just like, well, you're missing some, your way of thinking is like so methodical and classical or whatever it is. But in my conversation with them, sometimes they miss out on maybe some social aspect of things, or like a modern, like they're kind of disconnected from modern society, and maybe they pride themselves in that, like, oh, I haven't been poisoned, I haven't been polluted by the way but this is the world we're in. So if you're doing evangelization, if you're trying to reach the folks, sometimes I feel like their approach doesn't land because it doesn't understand their audience or their intended audience, right? They understand the people who already think like they do. So when they say stuff, the people who already believe or are acclimated towards that way of thinking, that's their audience. I mean, really, that's their audience. But if they're really trying to reach somebody who's outside of that sphere, I don't know if they have the capacity or the I don't know what you'd say, it's not the
vocabulary.
Capacity. They don't have the vocabulary, or they don't have even the interest in maybe it is the capacity. Maybe it's the ability to adjust and to pivot and to, maybe even try to understand the other person's way of thinking first. I mean, because you have to kind of break down the way they think first and then build them back up to the way you want them to start thinking, I guess you can say, right? So sometimes they just start off with, this is the proper way of thinking. The person's like, what? Well, I don't know. I'm sorry. It's like when people correct my grammar or my spelling or something like that. I'm like, I'm sorry. I grew up in a world where spell check was just the thing. and Grammarly is there. So I like overly rely on that. And then they correct me, but they have it with a tone like, why shouldn't you have known? Like, I can't undo my 12 years of public school education. Like, what is your goal? Are you just trying to belittle me? Are you just trying to, right? I mean, what exactly is your goal? Do you want me to be a better person? Are you trying to improve me? Or are you just trying to make yourself look better? Hey, I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes my sarcasm and some of my jokes or whatever it is, I'm not, a saint in that area either, but, I'm relying on other people to call me out on that too, right? So, sometimes I think folks are like, they think they're already perfect the way they are, or they're already like in the end state. so they don't, and then so they have to pretend to be this highly intellectual person, or I've read all of the documents of the 21 ecumenical councils. I've read, like, no, really what they did was they used AI to summarize some encyclicals earlier, and now they can talk about it or whatever it is. But who has time to read? I mean, honestly, if you have a real day job and you do job like in the world, you're not working for the church, right? Who has time to really read all of these church documents and be an expert, unless that's your profession?
Yeah.
Right. So if that's your if that's your side gig, you're telling me you have a full-time day job, and all of this, all of the encyclicals and stuff like that. I mean, maybe you're not doing your real job well. And I have a background in Opus Dei, and one of those things is, you have to have a balance, right? So if you're a medical doctor or a lawyer or something, you better put all of your effort in that profession and Christianize that work. And your side stuff about apologetics and stuff like that, that's like when you have free time. But if it seems like the folks like they spend so much time but then their main job is like flailing the real career. I mean, that's their vocation, right? My vocation is not a theologian. You mentioned I do theology. I do theology in a general sense, like how a Protestant talks about theology, right? Theology is the study of things of God and the study of God and the things of God. So in that broad sense, every field can be theologized because it's part of God's creation. So can you theologize film? Yeah, of course. You can Christianize film. You can make this into an evangelistic tool or something like that. So in that sense, you are doing theology if you're exploring themes of God and the things of God. And what are the things of God? I mean, it touches everything: morality, how you go about your business on a day-to-day life. I mean, that's so broad. But not to insult professional theologians, because they'll say, wait a minute, but that's what I went to school for. That's what right. So I don't mean to denigrate what they do. They're specialized theologians, right? They'll explore questions of theology that it's just way above my head. So anyway, I've gone so far afield on this. So back to your question. What was your question?
I don't think I asked a question. I just made an opening overview statement.
That's right.
But I wanted to jump in with, you talked about homeschoolers, and I don't know if you knew this. I was homeschooled, so I can.
Well, now I know. I know a few.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I know what you're talking about. And I know growing up as a homeschooler, there was always this sense of like, oh, those public schoolers, like they don't know anything, and like, etc. Yeah. And then I came to realize, like, I don't know if that's 100% true. Like
there's stigma on both. There's stigma on both sides, right?
Well, with the thing with the homeschooling is like the big pro to homeschooling is it has the potential for developing critical thinking.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the pressures of like A, your peers, and B, you don't have the pressure of a teacher teaching a particular worldview. I mean, depending, I guess, on how involved your parents are, but mine were pretty hands off. So it's basically like, here's the here's a textbook, here you go, do a certain amount of stuff. So I did a lot of my own, but there's potential for a greater flexing of the mind, so to speak, and I think that can lead to a certain amount of hubris. And whereas, you know, it's like you have critical thinking, and I had that growing up, but especially over my like late 20s and now early 30s, like it was definitely a sort of like, well, knowledge is so vast and everybody's got a little slice of it. So even if I'm like this big critical thinking giant, like even that public schooler who might be a little more conformist than you, a little more like just regurgitating information, they're going to know something that you didn't.
Yeah.
So I think there definitely needs to be a little tapering of that hubris, but
yeah, that to what end, right? So you have these folks that are like, you know, they can quote Greek philosophers or whatever it is, but what do you do with it? I mean, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's not valuable. I just mean that in my conversations with folks that just seem to come off as I've been more educated than you. I also feel like there's oftentimes they're not. Well, I shouldn't say oftentimes. I don't know. In my experience, there's something lacking there too.
Yeah,
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is I think where my strengths might be that I was fully educated in the public school system, whatever the strengths of those are, might be the deficits of somebody else who's raised in a totally different, and vice versa. So whatever strengths they might have. Right. So I very much benefit from really smart individuals and having conversations with them. But I do find myself when I sit there and I listen to them for 35 minutes, they'll just go on and on about all the quotes that they have and all the knowledge that they have. Fine. And then I ask them a question and they're like thrown off. You get what I'm saying? Like they're thrown off.
Yeah.
They're and I'm just like, to me, I'm thinking I'm asking a simple question. But for them, it throws them off a little bit because it's like they're going down the syllogism where it all makes sense. You know, one conclusion leads to the next premise for the next claim, and then all this other stuff. It all makes sense in their world. And then I ask them the question that seems so simple to me, and they're befuddled because you get what I'm saying. It's happened enough times where I'm just like, there is something lacking.
Yeah.
In the program that you went through, and even that the week I spent with Dr. Chap and his they called it the Spez Fest. I mean, I felt like the dumbest person in that. There are 25 people there. You've got professor, like true, real full-time professors of philosophy and theology, and they do this, and they've written so many things. I'm just like, wow, I'm in this room with these folks. And you know, a lot of them are, you know, and they've all been schooled in the communio theology. But I wasn't. I don't know what communio was. The names that they were mentioning were all condemned by all the traditionalist stuff I read. Right? You get what I'm saying? They were saying that those people were on the left. They were not as left as Ronner, as Schillebeeckx, as, you know, Hans Kung, which were the worst of the liberals. But some of these other names, I guess the Lubach or whatever it is, some of these other ones that were ressourcement, but communio, that's what I learned from that whole weekend, right? They were sort of part of this ressourcement movement, but there was a distinction between the progressives or the liberal wing of it, which is the names that I mentioned earlier, and then the communio theologians like Ratzinger. And it had to do with where they published their work in the theology journals that they. Anyway, my point is to say, I'm sitting in that room. I'm just like, I haven't read a single one of these things that they're talking about, but I was able to engage in what they were talking about once they started talking about practical stuff, like what does this mean to the Catholic or the Christian of today or the atheist of today. And I had to say, I mean, not to toot my own horn, I looked around, I made some comments, and there was people like, like they haven't thought about those things. So as deep as they've thought about within their own theological system, there's just other perspectives that you're missing because you are always, right? My mind is shaped by the stuff I've read in, 10% of the books that I have on my shelves, right? So that, but there's millions of other books I haven't read, and I'm relying on other people in my engagement with them to summarize that stuff for me, right? So you've read 100 books about of communio theology or liberal theology, right? Let's test it right now. Have a conversation with me. What's the best you've got? Right? And then, I'll give you the best I got, and then we'll see where it goes from that conversation. I don't know if that all makes sense, but yeah, there's just so much information out there. There's no way for me to know who's right. Like you said, if they all sound reasonably, like if you're not emotionally tied to one or the other, they all sound like, how do I know? At the end of the day, in my opinion, what people do is they trust the person. Like they develop a relationship with whoever they're talking to. And then they trust this person. Is this person trustworthy? Do I trust that they're not trying to bamboozle me? Do I trust that they actually, thoughtfully read through that material and they're presenting to me the best of what that, the synthesis of what they've learned from all that. And if it makes sense to me and I like this guy, he seems trustworthy, I can work with that. But if somebody seems shady and slimy and trying to trick me and trying to sell me it's kind of like what Shia LaBeouf said about, the Novus Ordo. He said something like, I feel like they're trying to sell me a car. They're trying to sell me something. And there's something to that. I mean, right? Not to be anti-Novus Ordo or to be pro-TLM, but, somebody who doesn't support the TLM or whatever, it's all for the Novus Ordo, should listen to that kind of, here's an outsider, a true outsider. And he's experienced Catholicism on both sides. To just oversimplify it and say both sides. He's tried the one in English and he's tried the one in Latin, and there's something about the Latin that speaks to his soul in a different way than the modern mass. What is that? You get what I'm saying? It's like, instead of just intellectualizing it and saying, well, he's just, it's the smells and the bells and blah, blah, blah. They intellectualize everything. I'm just like, well, why can't we just sit with that and just appreciate the fact there's something moving or working in that guy's life that for him, the TLM is better for him than the Novus Ordo is. And it could be true for somebody else. Like I brought my Protestant pastor friend, who's a professor of philosophy. I brought him to the TLM, and he's sitting there. I'm like, wow, he loves this. He's sitting on the edge of his chair. He's looking at the thing. He's like, what is that? I could just imagine what's going on internally in his mind. And here I am thinking, wow, he loves it. I'm pretty sure he loves this more. He would love this more than the Novus Ordo. And then I interviewed him for 2 hours on my podcast. I don't have one, but I interviewed him on film, and you can watch that thing. And he was like, I don't get it. Well, why Latin? Like he was not into it. He just wasn't. I'm like, I'm reading the wrong things in his body. He was curious for sure, but he's like, what's the point? I don't get it. It doesn't speak to me. It doesn't speak to the modern person. Why do I need Jesus? Why the smells and the Latin and all this other stuff? Yeah, beautiful, fine. I like the chant. So what? You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So it doesn't speak to him. It speaks to somebody else.
My family and I are friends with another Catholic family, and about half of them like the Latin Mass, and the other half just don't get the Latin Mass and don't like it. But I think then you get into the idea of personal experience, and which should be the definitive evaluation of which is the form to use, so to speak. And I know the trads would say it would be very suspect of personal experience.
The irony of them saying that.
Yeah.
Do you want to wait until I come? I mean, I have a.
No, I think I know what you're going to say. Is that lots of the people who are becoming trad do so because of personal experience.
Exactly.
Which is quite funny.
Why are they sitting there? It's because they hate the tambourines. They hate the stuff. Yeah. They don't like it. So they're looking around, and then they find this TLM. Like, ooh, that's more my scene. Right? That's all they talk about, yeah. Right? Why are you here? Well, because of the local thing, and I didn't learn preaching about this, and they're liberal, the right personal experience. That's what you're doing. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. My own opinion is that the two are symbiotic. Like, you can't get rid of one without the other. I mean, obviously, like if personal experience trumps established dogma, we know who's going to win.
Well, you mean in that person's life, or who's going to win in overall?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, I suppose we know who's going to win in both cases.
And you can't rely on just that. But
I know my own faith is very personal experience too. Like, and I grew up trad, and I was taught all the trad things. But the reason I stay is because of all the personal experiences I've had, because of all the times when I thought I was going to die or even go to hell, and God saved me. So like that's why I stay, Is that objectively correct? I don't know. But that's why I stay. So, I mean, is that valuable? Well, if it gets me, if it means I remain Catholic and die in a state of grace, then I'd say that's valuable. Would I build a theology on that? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't build an entire theology on one person's personal experience, but personal experience, I think, can have clues.
Sure.
Can give you clues to what's out there. But
I mean, that observation is theological, right? I mean, does God speak to you through the incidental things of your life and not just the major things? If your answer is yes, that is theology. You're saying God operates in that way.
Congrats! I'm a theologian. Does that mean I get to go to the next Spez Fest? Do I get to go to the next Spez Fest?
Yes, you can. Absolutely.
if I want to pay for the plane ticket.
Yeah, if you want to go to the next one, I'll pay for your plane ticket.
I appreciate it, but
I'll make that.
I don't really travel much anymore. There's just too many different challenges I have, like medically and all that, and logistically and all that sort of thing.
Maybe we'll have it there. I mean, that is his hometown after all.
Lincoln, that would be cool. I do have schemes of trying to turn Lincoln into a Catholic cultural center. I'm afraid the odds are very much against me, because whenever I tell that to somebody who lives in Lincoln, they're like, "Oh, well, we have all sorts of plays." I'm like, "Well, I suppose that's better than nothing." But I'm talking about cultural export, because the Lincoln Diocese, one of the things I love about the Lincoln Diocese is it seems like it's balanced. Everybody says that, it's the most conservative diocese in the country. But at least when you look at Bishop Conley in particular, he just has such a balanced approach. Like, yes, he has the orthodoxy of the faith, but he doesn't tip into like the pride and cruelty that I mentioned before that some of the other groups do fall into in the process of like upholding conservatism and orthodoxy and all that sort of thing. Now, so it's a real beautiful thing, and I just wish that we could, put it in a bottle and sell it to the rest of the. Donate it to the rest of the.
Were you? When did Bishop Bruskowitz retire? He's still alive.
I think he's still alive. He gave me my first confirmation. I don't remember exactly when the transition was. Maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Okay, so 2010, something like that, 2011.
Probably more like 2015 would be my guess.
But about 10 years. Oh, did you say 15, or you said
this is a very vague, rough guess.
I only asked that because maybe because he officially excommunicated the SSPX himself.
Yep.
Yeah. So I remember reading that when I was in Una Voce. I was like, whoa, that's pretty strong, because he was known to be a conservative bishop in the 2000s or whatever, but not trad per se, right? He wasn't like associated with like trad groups, but he was certainly like a conservative one, like of the Ignatius Press type trads. He had books and they were published by Ignatius Press, so he's probably in a certain. I like putting people in categories. I know some people are allergic to that because it makes things simpler for me. Like, what kind of Catholic are we talking about here?
Please put me in a category because I don't know where I fit.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you would put yourself, but I like associating it with where they output their stuff.
Oh, okay.
Right. So when I say trads, I'll talk about the Catholic Family News type trads. Are you talking about the remnant newspaper trads? Are we talking about the Latin Mass magazine trads? Are we talking about, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And even like publishers, like there's a TAN level and there's like Sophia Institute Press, which is kind of in the middle. They're kind of traddy, but they're also like, they have Novus Ordo stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there's different flavors. And it just makes things easier for me to like categorize generally. And yeah, people are complex for sure, but we always seek some level of summary, some level of shorthand, right? Cliff's notes, and that's my way of doing that.
Our brains cannot process the entirety of reality. Like even our eyes do not see everything.
Right. Which feeds into the topic of SSPX, to go back to SSPX.
Yes, let's
all of their experience, you could say, is filtered through their summary, understanding of how the world works and how the church works, right? And everything's filtered out, non-essential stuff, anything Novus Ordo, anything related to the diocese. It's like, no, everything is just like within this, my chapel, this is Catholicism for me. I get it. Why not? If you're an ordinary person, you're just trying to raise your kids, you got 7 kids, you got to pay your bills. Why worry about what's going on with the diocese? Wouldn't it be nice if most of what we just worried about in terms of Catholicism was just whatever's going on in my local parish? Yeah. I should go to mass. I'm like, oh, we're going to have a carnival. We're going to have a picnic next week. Cool. That's appealing to me. Wouldn't I? Yeah. I don't know why. I keep getting drawn back into the dramas of the global church when I would just love to be honest with you. Look, there's a ordinariate, and they used to be an hour and a half for me when I lived in Redlands, California, is where I live. I would hardly go. I was very much involved in a lot of discussion when they first started and stuff. I knew the priests and all this other stuff, but they were so far away I couldn't get involved. But now I'm just like 30 minutes away. It's just as far as I would go for Latin masses or any other masses around here. So what I started getting more involved now that I'm closer, and I really like enjoying like just feeling safe. Yeah. Just feeling this is a home. This is a home. Mm-hmm. I don't go there exclusively, but I'd like to. And they're going to build a brand new church in about 4 years, and that'll be 15 miles away. I am anticipating that being my home church, where I just feel I don't have to worry about what's going on everywhere else. Yeah. It'll just be, I'll just have to get used to the these and the thous and the whatever it is in English. Mm-hmm. It's fine. I would still prefer the TLM if it was close by, but it's not. The closest one is the SSPX, and that is verboten at this point. At this point, definitely verboten.
But is it?
Oh, yeah, but that's the question, right? But is it? Okay, well, who are you going to listen to?
I know, right?
I mean, it's as you would expect. The same people who supported the SSPX before, for the most part, are defending them now. So what can they do wrong for them? That would be my question. What would SSPX have to do for you to just say, you know what, that's too far? Yeah. Because for some, like, look, Russell something Shaw. I think his last name is Shaw. Anyway, or the former president of Una Voce International, or Professor De Mattei, to just name one that I know of that wrote about this. He basically said it's turning the clock back of all the progress that we've made within the official church for the Latin Mass. Right? It's gonna shine a light on us again, and it's gonna turn the clock back. Oh, we're gonna be associated with those folks, those renegades, those they don't want to listen to what the Pope has. Like, that's the whole reason why the Fraternity of St. Peter started. People keep forgetting that. All the ones that they support FSSP, they support ICK, but they kind of like want to reserve the SSPX, like, oh, they're not so bad, they're good people, all this other stuff. We're not saying they're bad people. Just like we're not saying, who's saying that the Eastern Orthodox folks are bad people.
Mm-hmm.
If you go spend a little bit of time with Orthodox folks, they're wonderful people, and they love their faith, and they live it, they believe it. You could feel it. I went to their Pascha this year. I went there 3 years ago. I am very impressed with their ecclesiology, their community, and all this other stuff. They're great people, but it has nothing to do with saying, can I go to the Eastern Orthodox for my sacraments? No, if I'm a Catholic. So in the same way, that's how we're assessing the Society of St. Pius X.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference, really, I guess you could say, is they're in the Eastern Orthodox kind of canonical situation. They're excommunicated, or they're not actually Orthodox, are not excommunicated, but they're in schism, right? They're not connected to the Catholic Church in the same way,
mm-hmm.
Every other parish is. Like, they don't report to the local diocese, right? They're not in communion in that sense. So can I go there for my Sunday obligation? Well, you have the mainstream church telling me I can't. You have local bishops writing letters, who is the head liturgist of your diocese. He's the authority that God has placed over your soul proximally, is your local bishop. And if your local bishop has written a letter in support of what Rome has said, shouldn't go there. On what basis do you say, no, you're wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you actually saying? Then if you can just say, no, you're wrong, well, what about everything else? What about the stuff he says about pro-life? Can you sit there and say, no, you're wrong? Kind of like that video you shared me earlier, that commentator that was listening to Pope Francis was just like, is that really the same thing? Oh, yeah, okay, come on. So disrespectful to your Pope. Come on now.
Well, in my I want to hear your thoughts on this. In my research prior to our podcast here, apparently in church history there were plenty of instances where the Pope said one thing, and many theologians were like, "No, you're actually wrong, Pope." And then eventually, the theologians were vindicated, and the Pope was wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously he did. Obviously he didn't like make an ex cathedra statement that was considered wrong, but and so that's the maddening thing about the whole Trad Novus Ordo thing. It's like, what of the Pope, what comes from the Vatican that we absolutely have to agree with, and is that different for a theologian, a learned theologian versus the average layperson? And do we even have to listen to it at all? Because as I'm sure you've heard the argument made many times, that the average peasant in the 1400s, 1300s had no idea what was going on in Rome. Now we find out in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
Everything. It's like in the past, it's like if Rome said something that you had to abide by, your local priest is going to tell you.
Oh yeah. That's the point I would make.
But now it's like every phone, every plain conversation that the Pope has with a journalist is broadcast. Are we bound by the authority to listen to that? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that it's very overwhelming. And personally, I think for me, the safer route is just to read what the saint said and listen to my spiritual director. And if my spiritual director is going to tell me something that the Pope said that I need to abide by, chances are God's going to want me to listen to him. Even my I guess you'd call him my pastor at the FSSP apostolate in Lincoln once told me that St. Alphonsus Liguori said that if you listen to your priest and he is wrong, God is still going to honor that obedience.
Yeah. Well, you're, because, you're not expected to know better necessarily, right? You're expected to understand, the basics of your faith for your sacraments, whatever has been imposed on you by the past, right? Study the Baltimore Catechism. Okay, well, that's not infallible necessarily, right? But that was the norm of these United States. I guess the Baltimore Catechism was the thing, was the regula, was the rule, right? So that's what you need to study, and then you memorize that stuff, and then you're good to go. Get your sacraments, right? So things have changed. Now you have other things. You have, you have the Universal Catechism of the Catholic Church. You have the American Catechism, and there's some like weird, fishy things in there too. But I mean, I think the safe thing, in my opinion, would be like to not have this attitude of suspicion all the time. I think that's what I had when I was a traditionalist. Like this attitude, like, the narrative is the church has gone astray since the Second Vatican Council. So you got to take everything that they say with a grain of salt and analyze it based against the teaching of the church prior to Vatican II and all this other stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, if I'm sitting there sifting and filtering everything that the modern church is saying through pre-Vatican II teaching, well, then can the church ever teach anything of value that's different from before?
Yeah.
I mean, even the language
snapshot
yeah.
Catholicism.
Snapshot, but even just the way I phrase it right now, there's going to be a tradition that's like, oh, so you think that the church can change its teaching? Well, that's not what I said. But what is my question is, what is the role of the church then, if all we have to do is to preserve exactly the formulas of the church as it has always been? I mean, even that would be kind of naive to think that the formulas of the church have always been the same in every century and generation. Obviously not. Why do we have councils? Because there's articulations and clarifications about the faith that have become clear, that were not opposite what was taught before, but it was perhaps not clear. Right? So Jesus is the Son of God. We knew that. You have the Apostles' Creed. Every one of those articles, true, right? But then you get to the Nicene Council, and then now you have the Niceno-Constantinopolitan, whatever creed, right? And I'm not a scholar of history, but that is, basics of what people, I think, know generally, right? That's what we say on Sunday, the Nicene Creed. Well, why is it like so much longer than the Apostles' Creed, if all we had to do is just articulate the faith in the way it's always been? Well, obviously there's a beefing up, you could say, of the Nicene Creed that enhances, does not contradict. Nothing of the Nicene Creed contradicts the Apostles' Creed, but it enhances. We have a fuller, richer understanding of all the articles that are articulated in the Nicene Creed than you had with the Apostles'. Well, then you also have all the other creeds that developed after that. That adds more flavor, you could say. Doesn't contradict the previous, but adds a little bit more flavor. So the question for an SSPX person would be, that's why it's not a liturgical. A lot of people assume the SSPX issue is a liturgical one. It's really doctrinal at its core, because it talks about their views of what the nature of the church is, religious liberty, what is true worship. Yeah, that's part of it, the liturgy stuff, right? The liturgy wars. But all the stuff that they're questioning about Vatican II, the real question is, and it was the Ratzingerian model, right? Can you interpret Vatican II in continuity with what came before, or is it a hermeneutic of rupture, right? You've probably heard these phrases. Is it the hermeneutic of continuity or the hermeneutic of rupture? Because the idea is the rupture hermeneutic is now we have a different theology, a different teaching that's contrary to what was taught before. That's why it's rupture. It's a break. But if you can interpret it in continuity, then you don't have a problem.
Yeah.
So that the irony though is the SSPX have in their, you can read it in their books, their approach is a rupture interpretation in just as much as the liberals have an interpretation of rupture. They might not say it that way, but they'll say it's a new springtime, it's a different whatever it is, right? But then it's really it should be the mainstream traditionalists and the conservatives, the ressourcement folks, I guess you can say, are trying to reconcile the content, right? The stuff before Vatican II and the stuff after Vatican II, and there must be a continuity between the two. Because, right, it's scripture, right? You can't teach something contrary to what was given.
Right.
So anyway, you were going to say something, and
No, I just wanted to staunchly affirm the hermeneutic of continuity, because that's the sanest, to me, that's just the sanest option to the whole mess.
Yeah.
Like the church stopped with Vatican II. Like, really? Like, really?
Or started.
Or started with Vatican II. Yeah,
yes,
like, really? Like, come on.
I mean, I think that's, yeah. So, I think that's the major question. It's a challenge that the State contest will have against the SSPX. What do you believe about the church? What do you believe is, so you can't have it both ways. So if the language of the SSPX folks, the folks that surround themselves with the society culture, talk about the pre-conciliar church and the post-conciliar church, you have to ask the question, what do you mean by pre and post? Are you saying that the post-conciliar church is a different church than the pre-conciliar church? Answer that question. Now, if they say, no, it's the same church, all right. But they'll say things like Rome has been overtaken by Satan, and it's being led by who are you talking about? Are you talking about Pope Leo XIV is a modernist? If you're saying that, he is the head of the church that you claim to be part of. Can the Pope be a modernist, aka a heretic? Because modernism is a defined heresy, right? It's been declared a heresy by previous popes, right? So if your claim is this is a modernist pope, you're saying that the pope is a heretic. So can the pope be a heretic? Can a heretic be the head of the Catholic Church? Can the vicar of Christ be a heretic?
I don't know the answer to that one.
But I mean, I might not know the infallible answer, but
maybe there's like, I mean, he can be a informal heretic, right? He can't be a formal heretic.
Well, somebody has to.
I mean, clearly he can be flawed. We know that.
Sure.
And clearly he can be wrong. But to the degree of being a heretic, that I don't know. That's above my pay grade.
Well, who can judge the Pope, right? That's the thing. So that's the thing. But the
theologians apparently did.
Yeah. Well,
Saint Athanasius apparently did, but
declared him a heretic.
Oh, I don't think he declared him a heretic.
Oh, he believed he was a heretic,
but he opposed him. Well, and the Pope was what? My history is rusty. Was the Pope at the time part of the Arian heresy? Wasn't he like coerced into like signing some kind of Arian document, or am I thinking of a different Pope?
I'm not the right person. We need to fill up
Campbell
part of this conversation.
Yes.
I don't want to say the wrong thing. I just know some of the stories, right? When they dug up the bones of one of the popes and put the bones of that pope on trial, and then they threw his bones into the Tiber. That's a real story. So he was declared by a council to be a heretic pope. But that's the thing. It's like, while that pope is alive, he's the pope.
Yeah.
So you got to treat him as the Pope. I mean, like an ordinary individual should treat him like the Pope, because how do you know? You don't know. You just know he's the Pope. He's apparently the Pope, and let the real powers that be make those declarations and decisions later on to dig up his. I don't know if we do that in modern times, dig up the bones of John Paul II or something. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that in modern times? Digging up, Benedict XVI. No, they're not going to do that, but.
Well, that leads me to a point or an observation that sometimes I think traditionalists particularly fall into this idea that you have to get everything right or everything correct in order to be saved. You have to like know all of the, or you have to know and assent to every last truth, and if you get one thing wrong, then something's off. But I recently found, I mean, I'm assuming it's true, but I saw someone quote Anne Catherine Emmerich, Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, that she had a vision where she saw Protestants in purgatory. Pious, well, they were pious Protestants, as she said. So it's like, I'm pretty sure they didn't get everything correct.
Yeah, but
they still went to, apparently they still went to heaven. Now, of course, she's a private visionary.
Sure.
But she's not exactly unapproved or anything like that. So well, I mean, and that's another thing that, you know, I'm sure the SSPX take issue with is the, you know, is there salvation outside the church, which I've heard it. I believe Steve Skojec operates under the old way, you know, saying it, and it's funny, like he's an agnostic right now, but he's still very, when he talks about Catholic things, he very much operates from a trad perspective. But I've always heard it said that what that means is that if someone outside the church was saved, they were saved through the church. Or maybe like those pious Protestants somehow, by God's grace, were within the church.
Yeah.
Of course, then you have the question of like, and here we here's the theological rabbit hole of like, well, but, you know, Scripture says that unless you're baptized with water, you know, you can't have eternal life.
Sure. Like that. There's exceptions to the rule. So it's hard to say with Society of St. Pius X with clarity, because they have a book that's titled "Is Feeneyism Catholic?"
Oh, really?
Yeah, and of course they're not Feeneyites. You know, the followers of Leonard Feeney denied baptism of blood and baptism of desire. You have to be baptized by water to be saved. So it was a very strict extra ecclesiam nulla salus interpretation. So even the SSPX wrote a book against Leonard Feeney. They're not Feeneyites. And the whole book is, I don't know where it is here in my shelves, but it's in my red pile over there, very small pile, out of the thousands of books that I have. But it's quotes after quotes and from saints after saints about situations where individuals were saved or understood to be saved in some way outside of the strict rule, I guess you could say. So there's exceptions. It's like the New Catechism says when it under the header of no salvation outside of the church. It says that, you know, there might be ways in which individuals are saved that is unknown to us. And so we hope, right? I think to me, that's really the qualitative difference between, you know, sort of dyed in the wool trads and you know, conservative types, right? We emphasize what is the teaching of the church about salvation, the things we're for sure about, and is there a possibility of exceptions to the rule? I think the more you know, the folks who are a little less like trad, like I guess you could say, are the ones that are like, you know what, that's outside of my pay, like you said, above my pay grade.
Yeah.
If there is a way, I'm not hoping against it, but I feel like, okay, if this is a mystical, you know, some people, you know, Philip's going to come in and say, if he ever watches this, he'll be like, oh, you're so mean to the trads. I'm like, look, my impression is there are some personalities or types, and they tend to be hanging out in the traditionalist groups. It's almost like they're like, how can we make it harder for people to come into the church? You know, how can we make it harder to get into heaven? It's like barrier after barrier after barrier. I mean, it's not so much they're explicitly saying you got to do these things necessarily, like they're making it harder. They're trying to make it harder, but it's like, and I explained this at the last time you interviewed me, I almost feel like because we try to be faithful Catholics and we're following all the things that the church, or trying to anyway, as best we can, it's not hard. It's not easy being Catholic. So when we see, we're like, it's like the scripture, the one that it's like we're the Catholics, we're the 9 o'clock vineyard workers, right? Or the laborers at 9 o'clock, and we're like, oh, we're working hard, it's sweating, the sun is high at 12 noon, and then the vineyard owner is bringing people up at 12 o'clock, and he's bringing them out to 3 p.m. And at the end of the day, he's like, oh, $10 for you, $10 for you, $10 for you. And we're sitting there thinking, why is a 3 p.m. guy getting $10 when I've been here since 9 a.m.?
Mm-hmm.
Do you get what I'm saying? And then what's his response? His response is, who's the boss here? Am I not free out of my mercy or out of my generosity to give as I will, as I please?
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be the lesson for us. The parable is about God is in charge. And if he wants to show mercy to the 3 p.m. folks, and he wants to be sort of proper with the 9 a.m. folks, that's his prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
And so the lesson is we should strive to be less like that 9 a.m. person and say, I deserve more than that person. Because the reality of it is none of us deserve any of it.
Right.
It's only because of God's mercy and grace that any of us are saved, whether you're 9 a.m., 12 noon, or 3 p.m. So just be joyful. Right? There's that other scripture, right? The joy in heaven when one person turns away from their sins,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
versus 10 that are already righteous.
Yeah.
But isn't that analogous to what we're talking about? Of people who think they're so righteous in their chapels and they're like, oh, I'm so good, right? There's more joy in heaven for the salvation of that atheist or that person in the Novus Ordo who maybe barely squeaks on by to get into heaven than the righteous person going to TLM every day.
Well, I think the kind of people you're talking about, the ones that want to make everything harder, is in big five terms. I think they tend to be orderly, disagreeable, and low in trade openness.
Yeah, so they're not willing to be flexible, not willing to. Okay,
and maybe they're high in neuroticism too. I mean,
yeah. So that's gonna be their struggle. See, that's the thing, right? It's just like the scripture says: God is not going to test you more than what you're able to handle, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So the challenge for somebody who's maybe not theologically astute or whatever, maybe their struggle in life is fleshly things. I don't know. Maybe it's like, the worldly things. That's their struggle. What's the struggle of the person who has all the right theological treatises all memorized in their mind? Probably pride.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's also fleshly things. Who knows? My point is to say that everybody has their own thing that they have to fight against. I have a book around here from the St. John Cantius canons, the manual for deadly sins. Now, it's not a manual to do deadly sins. It's a manual to fight against deadly sins. That would be a fun book, like how to sin better, right? That would be a fun book. No, it's about, the 7 deadly sins. And it's like it explains what the 7 deadly sins are, but then it talks about what the corresponding virtue is that you should strive for. And I learned a lot about that book because I'm thinking, okay, maybe my main thing is like fleshly things or pride things. I didn't even know I had envy things. I mean, it was talking about how envy is not just about jealousy. It's about you don't think that person deserves the good that they have in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am thinking, oh, I'm jealous of their Porsche. Like, no. Not everybody's a Porsche, but if I look over and somebody gets a promotion and I look over and I'm like, that person doesn't deserve that. That's that sin. That's an envy sin. So I'm like, okay, now I have more things to confess in confession. But anyway, my point is to say everybody has their different struggles. They might think they're ahead of the game, but again, we have to avoid trying to be, being that Pharisee, right? The Pharisee in the front of the temple. Like, oh, I'm better than that person over there. Thank God for not being like that dude in the back. Oh, that person's the one that's righteous. That person who doesn't think he's got it all figured out.
Right.
Anyway,
the other thing I wanted to mention too was, or raise the question of, what is the role and degree of suffering that should be imposed on Catholics? Now we know, we know, obviously we know that suffering's a huge part of salvation. Like so many saints have written about it. Like it's non-negotiable. The question is, from where and from whom? Now everybody already has to deal with the suffering of nature. Like storms, earthquakes, rabid dog biting you, disease, having to get up every day and work, otherwise you're going to die, and eventually you're going to die anyway, and it's probably not going to be very fun along the way.
Right.
So there's plenty of suffering there. The question, I think a big question of like trad versus, post Vatican II is, how much suffering should the church impose on its members? Now, in the past, there was more suffering imposed, like more days of required fasting and longer Eucharistic fasts and things of that nature. One thing to point out, though, is in the past, there was just more suffering in general in life. Like, oops, that person died of the Black Plague. It was probably pretty miserable, too. So, like, oh, I've got a toothache. Well, what do I do? I don't know. There's nothing to do. You lose your tooth. I have an old relative out in western Nebraska, in the past, I don't know, 1800s or whatever. She had to have her tonsils out, and there was no anesthesia. So she's fighting I think it was a barber at the time who did it. She's fighting the barber who's trying to put the scalpel in her mouth. And I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of suffering. Nowadays, our baseline level of suffering, generally speaking, is much lower because of modern technological advancements. Right. So at least generally speaking, I mean, like there are probably definitely ways that we do suffer more in some ways than people in the past didn't, like depression and anxiety and psychological issues and all those sorts of things. But generally speaking, like as far as like physical pain, like we don't have as much, generally speaking, as people did in the past. And it's interesting that the amount of suffering that the church has imposed has kind of like gone down with that. So the big question is, should that be the case, or should the church impose for the benefit of its member, which should be for the benefit of its members? Like, should it impose more suffering than it does already? The SSPX says absolutely. Number of trads, non-schismatic trads would probably say yes. I don't know what the basis for their saying yes is, other than, well, it was that way in the past. I'm just like, yeah, but we didn't have the dogma of the Immaculate Conception in the past either. So, and as far as I understand, these are disciplinary practices, not dogmas. So it's not like, oh, well, they can't be contradicted or they can't be changed. Like they're now we can question all day long, like, is it prudent to do so? So
I have different opinions, I think.
I want to hear them.
There might be some truth to the traditionalist. I mean, you hear their rationale for it to say, of course, everybody is too comfortable today, and that's the reason why they can't handle mild depression, or they can't handle, challenges, or they can't handle, Sunday of a holy day of obligation or something like that. They're too soft. They don't want to dress up for mass and this like that, because what they lacked was they needed to not eat meat on Fridays. Like, I mean, what is our goal? I mean, at this point, we are where we're at. We're 60 years past to the Second Vatican Council. If it's as bad as they say it is, especially from the Society's perspective, Society of St. Pius X, if it's as bad as it already is, what's your goal? I mean, if you're trying to say, oh, we just need to get people to eat no meat on Fridays, again, get the church to do that. Do you think the Catholics of today, like overnight, if they just said no meat on Fridays, back on the books, that's going to solve all the problems?
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
oh, what we need is more holy days of obligation. What we need is we can't be transferring the Thursday, Friday, holy days of obligation to Sunday anymore. What we need is we need to do this, that, or the other thing. Like the Eastern Orthodox, let's have 40 days of no meat at all, like the old days and the ancient, like even in the West. It was no meat the entire 40 days and not just on Friday or whatever it is. Is that the solution in today's age, to just go back to those things? Who's going to follow that stuff? They're going to go in droves to the Protestant churches. In my opinion, that's what they're going to do. It's like, why are you, all of a sudden we have all this freedom after Vatican II, and now you're going to give us all these rules again without understanding of the meaning of those rules? It's not going to be efficacious or valuable, right? Can you imagine before Vatican II that everyone understood why we didn't eat meat on Fridays, or why we fasted as many times as we did, or all the rules and regulations that we followed in the church? I would imagine so many people just did what they did because it's what you did as a Catholic. That's what you did.
Yep.
So were those sacrifices really efficacious for their soul when it was just mundane things that you just did? I mean, I think in our modern times, we understand that personal responsibility, right? And taking ownership of your actions, whether it's sacrificial or sinful or whatever, that's going to be much more meaningful spiritually in your progress than just kind of, oh, I go to confession, check, and I just say all the things. Like, you're not going to progress if you're not going to delve deep. What's the root cause? Why am I this? Why practice the virtue, right? So it seems to me like it's going back because they think that there wasn't the craziness in society before Vatican II. So let's just go back to that. It's kind of like a computer. When a computer goes awry, goes whatever, what do we typically just do? Let's reset our computer, Control Alt Delete, right? Unplug the thing, and then most of the times it works, right? So there's an intuition there of resetting. I don't want to deal with fixing complexities of this problem. I just know the last time it worked well was last Thursday. So you click the buttons to restore your computer to back to last Thursday and not worry about it. And you cut your losses with what new documents you created since then. It's just easier. So it seems to me that this is what the traditionalists have done. It's so complex of what has happened since Vatican II. I'm overwhelmed. I don't have time for that. I just know it worked well before they did all these changes. So let's just go back. So even more traddier trads will say, let's go back to 55. 62 is not even. So SSPX, their missile is 62. They don't go to the 55. So you got the fraternity of St. Peter that is like, actually, we're cooler. We can go back. We got dispensation. But they can get dispensation because they actually believe the church has authority. So they ask for permission and they got permission, and they do the 55 Holy Week. And fine, that's cool. But they got approval. They didn't renegade and do their own thing. They're within the church. They're still connected to the root of the church. So unfortunately, what's happened with the society is it's just like scripture. The Jews that were cut off, their branches have been cut off, and it's up to them to regraft themselves in back to the true root so that they can flourish. But you can't flourish when you've cut yourself off from the root. And that's what the Catholic Church is. It's the root. It's the modern day, Israel.
I would challenge their understand or their idea, their notion that if we just go back to 1950 or 1960 or whatever, then if we just reset, then everything will be fine. I'm like, no, what do you think led to the Second Vatican Council? 1950, 1960. Everything, it didn't just come out of nowhere. You know, the alien spaceship didn't just drop it into the Vatican and boom, we have a new council. Like, no, these things develop over time, and the conditions accumulate like a storm. Like the storm out here on the prairie doesn't just come out of nowhere. Like, you have to have the right atmospheric conditions and all that sort of thing. So that's why I returned to my overview statement that I think their major issue is snapshot Catholicism. Like, we're not looking at the entirety. We're not looking at the ideal. We're looking at this. We liked this particular era. You know, a lot of things happened after this era we didn't like, so let's return to that era and just make that the entire church. And it's a very limiting thing. Just like, you know, if you're gonna, like, the idea that the church just started at the council, like, that's a limiting idea too, because there's a wealth of everything that went before it. So I think that might be, as far as like the sort of philosophical problem, I think is that might be their major problem, because the whole thing with the abuse, you know, the violent corporal punishment that is excessive, and that was a thing in the 1950s, Catholic, Protestant, everybody. But it's not what the saints said. It's not what the saints prescribed. And they're the ideal, at least much more so than average practice in the 1950s. So I think it's just very, very limited. But the thing I want to touch on before we end is what the SSPX gets right. You know. Go ahead.
Well, can we put a pin on that for a second? And just I wanted to add this because I don't think I mentioned this earlier.
Sure.
It might be a thing of time. Like, just because something was true, it was good beforehand, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true now. I mean, the whole fact that we have Old Testament or Old Covenant and New Covenant, why? Why didn't we just have the same covenant throughout the whole? I mean, well, you know, theologically, it's the same covenant. The New Covenant is the fulfillment of the old. Whatever. Let's not get into that. The point is that there was a different kind of relationship we had with the God, God in general, in the old covenant. It was one where you had animal sacrifice and blood and all this other stuff. It was very ritualistic. It was very, you know, it seemed like it was a wrathful God, and we had to propitiate his wrath by offering these sacrifices. And that was, according to the record, that's the relationship we had with that God, with the same God. But it's qualitatively different in the New Covenant because Jesus intervened, and our relationship with God is different. It was sacramental, grace replaced law, that kind of a thing. Like, so things change because time. There must be a logic and a plan to this all. So I guess to the point you're making about the saints, there might have been a time where we needed corporal punishment, just like we needed the punishments of the Jews, of the Israelites in the old covenant. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Time after time, they were going against God's will, and they were being punished, right? You know, in left and right, because they were stiff-necked people from the scriptures, right? But then it's different. It's different in the new. So that might be the commentary of the saints that you're talking about, to say, we've come a long way where we don't need corporal punishment like we did before. So maybe in the same way, when Francis changed the catechism to say, maybe it wasn't the way, but we needed capital punishment before, but in today's age, do we need capital punishment still? At least entertain the question rather than reject it because it's a modernist idea of Vatican. Does it make sense? Or post-Vatican II? Yeah. Why not? Why can you not stretch your traditionalist brain a little bit to say, at least in some places in the world, do we need to hang people? Do we, like, my gut tells me when I hear a story of a pedophile or someone who rapes and someone who annihilates their whole family because they have a new side chick and they want to marry that person, those true crime stories boil my blood. And on those moments, I say, yes, hang them from the highest tree, torture them, whatever. But that's not the mercy of God. Don't we deserve that for our sins? And yet we're asking for God's mercy for our soul, for our eternal souls. So in that same way, even though our emotions are like, that person should pay for their sins, but can that person ask for mercy in the same way we're asking God for mercy, who we've offended infinitely more than that person has, has offended and murdered somebody or whatever it is. Yes, heinous crimes. But anyway, my point is to say, stretch your brains just a little bit to open the possibility that that the Pope is not saying it's morally wrong all times to have done capital punishment, but that in these times, maybe it's not so much.
Yeah, at least revisit the question, because it's not something that, to my knowledge, is, enshrined dogma.
Some people treat it as such.
Well, some people treat everything that they grew up with as enshrined dogma. So,
but that's the solution,
regardless of whether or not it's actual dogma or not. So.
But that's the solution I'm proposing: is folks need to be. See, I'm probably off. What was that personality trait you said? I'm probably closed off to open, but I have to really force myself to stretch.
Yeah. The thing with capital punishment, the opposite argument I've heard is that, well, if you execute somebody that really makes them come to terms with mortality and eternity and that kind of thing.
That's true. Also,
so I think that's a good argument on the other side. Okay, there are other arguments that could be made that, well, they would have more time in life in prison to actually think about what they did and make some kind of conversion.
So
that I don't know.
Both can be true. Both can be true, right? Because you might be in a state where capital punishment still exists, and that person is now faced with urgency of their conversion. And then they might be in a state where it's a moratorium, where they don't get executed, they have life in prison. Maybe that person needs the rest of their life to, you get what I'm saying? Like, maybe because of the variation that we have in application of laws or laws that exist in the books, that maybe that's really what they need in those places. Maybe that's why that person I don't know. I'm a big predestination guy, so I do feel like everything plays out anyway. So trying to figure this out doesn't make any huge difference. It's just going to play out the way it's going to play out.
Yeah, that's a good point. But anyway, I want to move on. I'll probably want to wrap this up in like maybe 18 minutes or so. But I do want to move on to kind of close with, we've persecuted the poor SSPX throughout this whole show.
In theory, in principle, not the people themselves.
Yeah, I know SSPX people, and I love them dearly. I disagree with what their movement has done, but here's the thing, like, this is where I get caught between like trads and Pope splainers, if you will. It's like yes, the SSPX is wrong to consecrate the bishops, to reject Vatican II without qualification and all that sort of thing. But the church still needs reform.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, as with so many other things, people fall into opposite camps. They're like, the church is so bad that it can't be saved, or that we need to create a new church but pretend it's the old church and say that's how we're going to save the church. Some kind of like mental gymnastics that way. Or you got the other people who are like, oh, well, you're just a schismatic. You've got to adhere to Rome and everything that Rome says, and Rome can do no wrong, and and there's no, this is the way, we've solved all the problems, and if you dare question it, you're a schismatic. Like, I'm sorry, but I think that I really believe that the way is the St. Francis of Assisi way, the St. Teresa of Avila way, where you see the corruption in the church, and what do? You don't attack the church. You don't leave the church. You build up the church in your own sphere.
Yep.
But I think the area that I dare I say sympathize with the SSPX is that, yeah, things are a mess right now. Like, even though, I have people tell me that, the German bishops and Father James Martin and so on, they're very clever, and they have not, like, canonically entered into the realm of heresy, even though we all know they're heretics. So they technically can't be, excommunicated. But the Vatican could at least, like, tell them where they're wrong, And the fact that they don't, and that they show no mercy to the okay, I have also heard reports that the Vatican actually has a long record of trying to reach out to the SSPX, and they've just, like, kind of spat at it. So,
that's true.
But at the same time, like, I find it hard to believe that the SSPX is 100% wrong in all of their diagnostics of what's going on in the church.
Well, I don't think so.
They go too far, I'm sure. And we know they can have some of the pathologies that, are that can plague some of the more traditional minded. But at the same time, we've got problems. And so give them credit where credit is due, I think.
Yeah. Well, look, I look at it this way. Do we not have enough folks that are concerned sincerely about the way of the church today to signal, like, we're going off the path and we need to get back online? Well, again, Dr. Larry Chapp, another common friend of ours who we find his work to be very helpful. He's one of those voices. He's one of those voices. We have enough of those people already in the church to help us recognize where things are. Who are these people who don't think Father James Martin is not teaching what the Catholic? It's not. I mean, who are these? There are folks for sure, but they already believe, they're already in that camp. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Their lives are already in that camp for the most part, and they just attach themselves to the philosophy of James Martin or whoever their heterodox, persons are. But yes, we need to address those folks. But just like E. Michael Jones, I mean, I'm not endorsing everything else that he says and what he was controversial for, but he had a recent interview with the 1 Peter 5 guy. I forget his name. I keep forgetting his name. Anyway, he's
Timothy Flanders.
Timothy Flanders. And he basically said, are you going to follow the TLM outside of the church? That's the main question. You love the TLM, you want this, but do you follow the TLM outside of the church if, for the sake of argument, they are outside of the church? You don't. It can't be your reason for leaving the church.
Yeah.
So that said, it shouldn't be the reason for you to go anywhere else other than you can recognize where things are wrong, even outside of not. I didn't know much about the SSPX when I was going to the Catholic family conferences that Terry Barber was doing back in the days. I don't know if you know that name, Terry Barber. He was the Catholic. He was the Lighthouse Catholic Media was part of that. You remember the CDs that were at the back of the church?
Yeah.
That was part of St. Joseph Communications, and that was all Terry Barber's thing. He was conservative Catholic, but he wasn't traditionalist Catholic necessarily. very evangelistic, apologetics, and all this other stuff. I didn't know much about the SSPX before that, but I knew to avoid the liberal stuff from Vatican II, those names from Vatican II, through that kind of ministry or apostolate, I guess you can say. Anyway, my point is to say, again, there's enough folks that can help us to know where things are orthodox. I mean, look, buy a Catechism of the Catholic Church. If you read that catechism, most of it, what's the problem?
Yeah.
I mean, if you scour through the pages of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, do you find anything that supports Father James Martin's teaching, or any of Sobrino, or any of these ones that were formerly censured by the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s? I don't know how much they do these days, but their stuff is not in the mainstream, in the real teachings of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's really a boogeyman, right? It's you read the stuff from the Society of St. Pius X, and they create this huge boogeyman, and the boogeyman is the mainstream church. And so you can't trust anything about the mainstream church. So you only trust what Bishop Fillet, back when he was SSPX, but you listen to Cardinal or Bishop Fillet and Bishop Williamson is the one I'm thinking about, or any of their bishops. They didn't understand really what the status of those bishops are. That's something to think about. What are those bishops? They consecrated 4 new bishops. What is a bishop? A bishop is a territorial, for the most part, it's supposed to be the territorial leader of a geographical location, right? But they are not bishops of a geographical location. They don't fulfill a see that existed before they were consecrated. They weren't. It's not like the bishops in China, right? They'll always say, "Oh, those bishops in China." But what are those consecrations doing? They're replacing real geographical dioceses that existed, whether illicit or illicit, whatever. They actually have jurisdiction, which the Society of St. Pius X bishops never had, because they were ordained or consecrated for the sole purpose of the sacraments that bishops are supposed to be the ones doing, like confirmation or something like that, right? So they actually have no jurisdiction or a ministry in the same way your local bishop has for regular Catholics. But what do the regular SSPX folks do? They treat those bishops as if they are their true pastors, their true bishop. They totally ignore. So here in the bishop in the Diocese of San Bernardino, if you're telling me, you as a person of the Society of St. Pius X congregation, you are a true Catholic. If I were to ask you who your bishop is, are they going to say Bishop Barnes, back when it was Bishop Barnes, or Bishop Rojas, who's the current bishop? Is that the name they're going to tell me? Or are they going to tell me it's Bishop Fillet? Or they're going to tell me it's Bishop Williamson? Because that should tell you right away whether their hearts in the church or not, or maybe it's just their intellect they're just ignorant of the fact.
Yeah.
But that should be the signal, right? Who is your bishop?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, if their answer is have nothing to do with the local Novus Ordo, the diocese, whatever, they have created a parallel church.
Mm-hmm.
And if by the nature of doing that, that's a schism. You created a parallel church with parallel sacraments, no concern for what's going on in the real diocese of San Bernardino. You're just in your little world in Colton SSPX chapel. That is not the Catholic Church. They're not part of the Catholic Church.
Yeah. As far as the little guy, the average person or the average trad who joins the SSPX.
Yeah.
Do you think they do it purely for the liturgy? Do they do it out of fear that, man, if I stay with this compromised church, am I gonna be saved?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I know that's what was going through my mind. because there's an idea. I think there's an idea that's prevalent in trad philosophy, trad thinking, that the stricter, the stricter path is always the way to God.
I
think there's kind of that thinking, and I often thought of that way before, and I always thought, oh man, I'm not like fasting on bread and water, I'm not like sleeping on the floor or anything like that. Like, am I going to go to heaven? And like, oh man, here's the SSPX over here, they're doing all the old disciplines, and they have more discipline than at least supposedly they have more discipline than the rest of us in the church. Does that mean that they're going to heaven and I'm not? And I think that's a half truth, because obviously plenty of the saints were very disciplined people.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm not sure everyone is called to the same level of discipline, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my reason for saying that is the litany of humility. At the very end, it says that others may become holier than I, provided I become as holy as I should.
Yeah, right.
So
just let me get by.
To me, well, at least that's another problem in itself. But so there's that. What was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah. So there's. Oh, I was going to say why I think that's a half truth. Let me retrace my thoughts. I was going to say that. No, it's getting late. Yeah, it's almost 10 here. I was going to say, that now everyone's called to that level of holiness. The other thing I was going to say, yeah, I remember now. I think it was St. Francis de Sales and Thomas à Kempis said something to the effect of, if you strive to do more in the spiritual life or attain a higher level of discipline than you're ready for, you're going to end up being even more lax than where you started.
Yes. Wow. Okay, that's pretty profound.
Yeah, it was just shocking, because if you would listen to some of the more traditional voices, you would think, oh, well, the saints were the strictest of the strict. I'm like, there's a paradox there. They were simultaneously strict and simultaneously human.
Yes.
And that's the thing. I think that is the plague of not just the church, but the modern world in general, is we have a divorce of paradox. Like, the paradox cannot make sense to our minds. We cannot possess it. So in order to make it small enough so we can grab it and grasp it, we split it up. We split it up and we pick one half or the other half. And you have people splitting, like left and right.
Yeah.
And I'll sound like a heretic for, even making that, saying that distinction is wrong. But even Peter Kreeft, I just saw Peter Kreeft now in his interview with Matt Fradd, who pointed out that, the people on the right, they have a fantastic ability of saying this is wrong when it's wrong. And the left doesn't always do that. But the left are more, I forget the exact words he used. He used multiple words, but basically, like, to borrow Big Five, they're more compassionate. They're like, okay, are the needs of the human beings being served?
Right.
And the right can sometimes just ignore that in order of, like, the truth.
Yeah.
And he said there, when you fall into both those, either side of that to too much of an extreme, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But that's a paradox. Like, to have both of those, justice and mercy, to have those both together is a paradox, but that's what our faith is about. Having having them together. It's unity, it's balance. It's not this divorce.
Right. Well, let me propose something. And I don't think I've thought about this before, but maybe it'll make sense. Maybe the paradox is not in the one individual, but it's in the whole body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what I said earlier. Some people need this. I mean, it's also scriptural. Some people need milk. Some people need meat. Right. And if God wills for this person to be saved, and so has elected this person, has predestined this person might need in their life more mercy than justice.
Yeah.
And that's in the whole scheme of things, that's what they're shown. From an outsider looking in, well, that person had a lot of mercy if they ended up in heaven. Whereas another person, God wills for that person to be saved. He has elected that person. He has predestined that person. But in that person's circumstance, that person needs more justice than mercy.
Yeah.
Because that justice might wake his ass up.
Yeah.
Right? You're right. You hear about the conversions in jail, right? Oh man, I had to make all these mistakes and drugs and all this other stuff, and then I found Jesus in the slammer or something like that. Like that person needed justice.
Yeah.
Maybe that person needs justice more than mercy in his particular story.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, if that's the case, if my theory is correct, then it's not really a paradox in principle, but it's like that flexibility has more to do with the needs of the individual at the right moment, so that person makes it to heaven.
Yeah.
So maybe for you, I don't know what your situation is. Maybe if you're inclined to have that kind of discipline and needs to have clarity and all that stuff, maybe that's what is surrounding you, because that's what you need to get through. Whereas another person who's maybe in the so-called lax novus ordo, that person is in a situation in life where they need a kind of the lack of discipline. Who knows what? I don't know how to describe that. I know that's going to sound so liberal for a trad to hear me say that, but it's not up to us. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's not up to you, Mr. Trad. It's not up to you, Mr. James Martin or Father James Martin or whatever. It's not up to us. So I hope he's a sincere person. I hope Father James Martin is a true Catholic and really wants to teach and preach or whatever, what he thinks is the truth or whatever it is. And he can make his case all he wants. Fine. But it's about the sincere. Well, I don't know. I can't be his judge. But my thing about it is, if I recognize he's teaching some heterodox stuff, if somebody asks me about it, I'll tell him. I'm not going to spend my life hating on James Martin and being upset all day long. Some of these folks, it's just like it's their life's mission to like always trash on the liberals or whatever it is. Fine, okay, whatever, they're wrong. So what? What are you doing about it? So the people that are in your life that need the gospel, that need evangelization, worry about that person. What is that? Is that person talking about James Martin? Most of them aren't. They don't know who James Martin is. So why am I going to spend most of my days worried and obsessed over what's going on the left when the people that I'm actually encountering have other issues? So I think what we need as individuals, as Catholics, whatever, who are the people in our lives that need the gospel? And listen to what their struggles are and figure out how to help them. And it's not going to be James Martin stuff. And sorry to say, it's not going to be Novus Ordo stuff versus Latin Mass stuff versus religious liberty stuff versus all the stuff that people fixate so much on in Tradland or Catholic Inc. or whatever you want to call it land. It's not those things. Even apologetics. I spent so many years studying apologetics. When you start talking to real people, apologetics helps, but their major issues are not apologetical for the most part. Their major issues are they're living with their boyfriend, living with their girlfriend, or whatever it is. Hey, I'm no saint either. I have my past, whatever, and whatever it is. But anyway, my point is to say, they need to. They have their issues that they're dealing with, And that's what needs to be the focus of our evangelization, is what did that person need?
Yeah.
Like Paul says, all things to all men, right? So am I all things to all men if all I spend my time on is trad topics? When most people don't care? I mean, SSPX, they claim 300,000 people in the world. It's all over the news for 300,000 people. My diocese alone has 1.1 million Catholics. Just my diocese, 1.1 million Catholics. Now, how many of them go to Mass regularly? Let's say the 30% is accurate. That's 300,000 people. So the people who go to Mass regularly in my diocese alone is equivalent to the entire world of Society of St. Pius X. Why are we spending so much time on them?
Yeah.
I mean, concern. I mean, I don't mean, of course, individuals mean something. That's not my point. I'm not saying they don't matter. I'm just saying that it's in the media, because the media is like, ooh, look at these renegades. They're not listening to the Pope, or that they're making it into their thing, rather than it's who cares? I mean, they don't care that there's a schism in the church. They don't, and so our concern is not so much, my opinion, my concern is not so much the Society of St. Pius X as a whole. That's going to play out organizationally the way it's going to. I don't think they're ever going to reconcile. I already talked about that in the previous interview or discussion. But who are the people around me? Are they SSPX people? Most of the people I interact with, not SSPX folks, but they are sympathetic to the SSPX. So the reason why I keep talking about the society is to call those people to say, you need to stop being sympathetic for the SSPX in principle. People for sure, but not in principle, because that's going to keep blurring the lines. Where is the Catholic Church? I'm not trying to be uncharitable to the people at Society of St. Pius X. I'm trying to say, for those who are here, who are flirting with the society, who look at them and say, wow, the grass is so much greener over there. Why don't I go over there? I'm trying to say, stop it. Stick with your wife. Sure, she put on a little pounds here and there. Sure, she's a little naggy. That girl over there, she's 20 years younger or whatever. It doesn't matter. This is the church. This is your wife. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The grass might seem greener over there, but then you get over there, then you find, you have your thrills for a few, whatever it is, and then you find out the substance is not there.
Mm-hmm.
And you look back at your wife that you've now divorced, and you're like, oh, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Stuck through with me. I mean, yeah, that interview with Peter Crave was great. I was bawling just with the 2 minutes that I watched of the short clip, because what did he say? He said, if you don't love that person's soul enough to imagine that person ugly and wrinkled and fat and whatever, and still love that person, don't marry that person.
Yeah.
So analogize it to the church. If you can look at the true Church of Jesus Christ and say, I can still love that church, regardless of how much they seem to care more for the German bishops or Father James Martin, or not maybe care for them, but just tolerant of them. But then they're being mean to the trads over here. To us, that's ugly. I'm analogizing it to what Peter Crave was saying. The church that's ugly and broken and not doing what it's supposed to be doing, but it's still the Church of Jesus Christ. If you look at that church and you can still say, I still love that church, you're still in the right spot, right? You're not going to go off and find another wife. It's not going to be better. I don't know. Does that make sense? I don't know. Sure.
Absolutely. No, at all.
That's the suffering that you're talking about. That's the suffering we need. We are living it already. We are. Yeah. We don't need more. Do we need more? Do you need to eat less meat? Most people are like vegetarian and vegan and all this other stuff anyway. They are suffering.
Yeah, life has a lot of suffering. And I think, circling back to the suffering thing, one priest, he was a Novus Ordo priest, our local pastor, once said that it's like, well, for most people, their jobs are a source of suffering. you know, and illnesses, you know, even though we might not suffer as much as they did in the 1800s, we don't usually die of tuberculosis anymore, but some people die of other things. And just trying to be holy, you know, just trying to be charitable to people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it's not always fun. You know, people are annoying.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's tough. So just you know, be a little more lighthearted. I think it's you know, going back to kind of what you said earlier. I shared this with a priest. He's a Novus Ordo priest. He does the Latin Mass from time to time, and we were going to go to lunch at some. We were going to watch a Marvel movie or something anyway. But I was chatting with him before that, and I said, you know what, I think is probably a handicap in the traditionalist communities is that it's a culture of scrupulosity, not always, but there is just this overemphasis on pious worm. I'm a terrible, right? I mean, fine, that's a language of the saints anyway, that recognize themselves as nothing or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But you are something. I mean, that's back to the paradox. You're nothing, but you are something because Jesus died for you on the cross. You know, on the one hand, you want to say you're nothing, that you're dust, you're, you know, all this other stuff, and not of any value, but you are of infinite value because Jesus died for your sin. So, so which is it? Maybe it's both in different.
It's both.
It's different senses. So, I think people wind themselves up so much in the practice of traditional religion, not so much because I don't think it's because it's like a Catholic doing these things in the 50s. Again, it's different from a traditional Catholic doing this stuff now. That's something that I think about. If you're in the 1940s, 50s, and you say, oh, my grandma did all these things or whatever, and she was so holy or whatever. Yeah, but that was the norm. Was it hard? Probably not so much because that's what you were doing since you were a child. Now it's a person rejecting the comforts of today's world and has taken on these practices because it gives them some level of security. I'm doing the right thing to get to heaven. So the question I would have is, what's your motivation for doing those things? Mm-hmm. Is it so that you feel certain of your salvation? Because that's really no different from my apologetics days when we talked about once saved, always saved, right? There was this kind of, or even other Protestants that had the, the Protestant work ethic. Because if they had health and wealth in their life, it was a sign that they were elect, that they were blessed by God. So my question is, if you're doing all these trad things, what is it doing for you? Is it trying to give you some certainty that you're saved? Because that's the whole paradox of the thing, right? I mean, and it's not a paradox, but that's the whole struggle of the thing. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know when our time will come. So what, you know, when the groom comes, or when the person comes back, right, in the scriptures, will he find faith? Is it the owner of the whatever it is?
I think you're mixing your parables, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's not a groom or something. Whoever the main person is, you know, or the clearer one is the thief in the night, right?
Yeah,
he's going to come back as like a thief in the night. You don't know, because if you knew, then everybody's gonna be saved. If Jesus said, "Hey, it's really gonna be next week," oh, you better clean up. You better do your debauchery now, and then clean up just the day before, right? Just so you can get by. No, that's the mystery, is that we need to, you know, keep an eye on our spirituality status at all times, right? Having our daily examination of conscience, prayers every day, all kind of stuff. But not as a checkbox, hey, I feel, hey, I'm saved. Right? Is that Christianity? That's what I'm trying to say. Is that really what Christianity is about? Check. Yep, I'm good. Good to go. How are you different? How would that person be different from the Pharisee? I pay my tithes. I do this. No, that's not the one that's saved. It's the other one. No. I don't know. I'm saying too much. I'm sorry. This is my Sunday sermon. My Sunday sermon.
You're good. I'm just I'm just listening in awe and also kind of winding down a little bit. Yeah, it's some people are just better at doing externals. By Myers-Briggs reckoning, it's 75% of the population.
Oh yeah, okay.
So like basically pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
And so the faith has externals, but you don't start there, I don't think. I mean, I think most people try and start there, but
maybe it's the opposite.
Really the way, I don't know, maybe this is just for me, but to me, the way you start is you start with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really the sum of the commandments, right? You know, love the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole soul and your whole mind. You can't really love without first being loved, right? I forget who said that. It was some prominent Catholic writer or somebody. So first, you have to go knocking on the door and say, Jesus, are you there? And then he'll come to you. And he'll love you, and then you learn to love him. But the second half of it is love your neighbor as yourself, which isn't as glamorous as a mystical relationship with Christ, but that's kind of the way you know if you love God or not, right? You love your neighbor. And I don't say that as someone who has mastered that by any means. You know, I tend to be this weirdo artist intellectual, and everybody else is just out there living their normal lives, you know, and they're like, who's this freak over here? And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I get a little resentful at that sometimes, you know. They're just like, but that's part of it, you know.
What do you what are you resentful about? Like that they have just normal concerns and
no, well, maybe it's just like projection on my, or imagination on my part. Is I've had handfuls of encounters, not everybody by any means whatsoever, but I've had handfuls of little encounters that make me wonder, like, are Catholics in Lincoln? I think I'm just like this like nonconformist megalomaniac who's like, you know, not going to college, not getting a job as a welder or an accountant, or not going to the football games on Saturday because, a little hint, Cornhusker football is the state religion.
Oh, is there?
Yeah. I'm not even the only one who said that, by the way. There was a big news anchor in Omaha who finally broke down and said that. It's like the only thing anybody really has to do in Nebraska is go to the football.
So maybe that's why.
And then I don't get married, you know. I'm like, because what I want to do is I really want to make films, because I believe builds up Catholic culture and introduces beauty to the world. And in much of my work, I try and use it as a form of subtle evangelism. And to me, that is a desperate need. And I've even talked to other people, usually non-Nebraskan Catholics who have some kind of promise, like, oh yeah, like, yeah, we really have a need for that. But it's just sometimes I just feel like some of my local people don't get it. And I suppose that's fine. Like, they're not called to that. So I need to just not be resentful. But
do they need to get it? Even if they don't get it, do they need to? What does that do for you? What does that do for you?
I really don't know. I mean, it's difficult because I have like hardly any support. Because I mean, I need actors, and it's hard to find actors, and most people are not interested in acting, so that's no fault of their own. But
would you have better luck in California because there's actors are a dime a dozen, or what?
I don't think I can handle California.
But that's not the question.
I also don't make enough money to live in California too. Like,
is it like, because you said this is your vocation, so I'm gonna say what I'm thinking is like, okay, if there's not enough actors to be part of your filmmaking, then it would make sense to me that either you change your profession or you go to a place that you can tolerate that has more of a acting scene to it. I don't know where that might be. Well,
once upon a time, I thought about moving to Dallas because supposedly there's a Catholic film community in Dallas, but partly though it's my own fault. I'm being too introverted. I don't get out enough to actually talk to any of the actors in the area. You know, I just rely on like Facebook posts or different group messaging platforms and be like, hey, I'm looking for actors. And I've found enough, you know, like God always provides. So I'm just griping, you know, but that's an example of like my temptation to not love my neighbor is to be bitter and resentful that nobody seems to care about what I'm trying to do. And I need to get over that, you know?
Yeah.
I need to just like, hey, like, you're not the center of the world, Aaron. Like, everybody else is just trying to get by in this crazy world, and they don't have time for, of course, I guess they have time to act in all the various plays in Lincoln, but so there are actors there. I just don't know them, and it's just hard to know them. So
maybe back to your question of suffering. Do you need more suffering? Maybe you should start eating meat on Fridays, and your suffering has to be meeting more people on Fridays.
Well, it's funny you say that. I actually do eat meat on Fridays, except in Lent. But the reason for that is because to maintain better consistency with my diet. Because I've tried doing tuna on Fridays, and it just throws me off. I think it's because tuna doesn't have enough choline. It has hardly any choline.
Okay.
So, you know,
that's what you need, and meat has that?
Beef in particular. And then eggs has that too. You know, eggs have a lot of choline. But, you know, subtracting the beef from my diet, you know, it's just...
I like eggs with imitation crab. Do I make an omelet on Fridays? So if you like imitation crab, and that's the seafood, and you have your eggs.
I do like imitation crab, but I give up Facebook actually, except for like posting about heart color or anything that's like pressing career related kind of stuff. But 90% of it, I give up Facebook, and honestly, for me, that's almost harder than giving up meat.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
But to the back to the point of like the suffering that's actually going to help you progress, in my opinion. I'm just, of course, I'm not your spiritual director.
I was going to say that this podcast evolved into my therapy
intervention. But I'm just saying, like, consider the fact that, you know, it's in terms of suffering, right? The thing that's going to, like, you have identified in yourself, like the thing that's going to help you in your vocation, career, or whatever, is to meet those actors, and you're just not doing it, or for whatever reason. So maybe that's the thing that's going to help you progress spiritually, vocationally, whatever, altogether, all around, is to suffer in that way, to say, hey, maybe not something huge, maybe you don't need to go to the cocktail party or whatever, but maybe if it's going to the local small theater thing or whatever, and just hanging around after, and hey, I'm Aaron, you know, whatever, you know.
I just bought my ticket to the community playhouse in Lincoln.
Well, there you go.
But
not
Saturday.
just the play, sticking around, socializing, talking to the folks, and joining whatever their clubs are. I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm an introvert myself, but hey, you know, there's still this natural longing for connection.
Yeah.
Just little. I don't like a lot of it. I'm not going to go to the praise and worship, whatever they invite me to, but will I go to their after thing? Maybe just for a few, you know, just to meet some new folks, invite them to the Latin Mass. That's what I used to do. So it's just a little bit of suffering for a little bit of growth. That's all.
Right.
It doesn't have to be huge, because too much suffering, what I was saying earlier was, when you wind yourself up too much, I think it creates this tension to at some point, I believe, that he reaches a point where the person inevitably goes back to their sin, because they've wound themselves up so much in the practice of restriction that when they hit a tough moment, they're just like, you know what, I might as well.
Jordan Peterson talked about that with studies they did on rats. So they had two sets of rats. In the one set, they were in a cage with nothing in it but this bowl of water that had cocaine in it. And obviously the rat got addicted to the cocaine.
Sure.
But then they had another cage where they also had a bowl of water with cocaine, but they also had like all these different, like, I don't know, like
activities,
stuff for the rats to do.
Yeah,
you know?
sure.
And those rats did not get addicted to the cocaine.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
The cocaine helped them do.
No.
Okay. See, that's what a Hollywood person would say. Hey, the cocaine helps me be, or like the marijuana. The marijuana makes me more creative. And hey, you know, maybe there's some truth to that.
For me, it's iodine.
Hallucination.
Iodine makes me smarter.
What's smart? I don't know. What is that? Is it like film stuff?
No, iodine is like a. I don't even know.
Well, for
exactly
your cuts, right?
what it is.
Yeah.
No, iodine is a supplement.
Oh, okay.
It's like a nutrient.
Is it related to salt, iodide?
Some salt has iodine added to it.
Oh, okay.
Because most Americans are deficient in it, apparently.
Yeah, I have too much salt. That's why I take pills for high blood pressure. So yeah. So yeah, no, I think. Oh, sorry, I know you wanted to close this off like 26 minutes ago, but I think it's at least personally, I felt this conversation has been.
Yeah, very good, very good. We I think we got into some good stuff. Hopefully we were fair, and we didn't carpet bomb the trads, or we didn't.
Actually, we spent a very little time on the SSPX. Actually, we talked about all sorts of other different.
Well, I think we talked about a lot of things that were related. The SSPX.
Yeah, there's Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we need to have a little more compassion with the actual people of the Society of St. Pius X. Not see again to distinguish the two. Just like hate the sinner. Love the sinner, hate the sin. Sorry,
that's your trad Freudian slip.
Sorry, that's my Freudian slip there. You gotta love the sinner and hate the sin. So in that same sense, you hate the concept, the principle, the fact that it exists. Right. Society, that fact that it has to exist. Society reminds that, but you love the people that are there because they're souls. They're souls that are misinformed, or they're just, you know, maybe they're just ignorant or naive about certain things. They just want. I get it. They just want liturgy that is befitting to what God deserves. I get it. That's what the TLM is. Yeah. You know, without having to be an apologist for it. I mean, I feel like for the Novus Ordo, you kind of have to be an apologist to fit the old idea of what the Mass is about and say, oh, it's still true in the new Mass. You know, that's a topic for another day. But you don't have to really stretch it for the Latin Mass, in my opinion. You could just go to it and you could say, this is what the Mass is, and you can go to it and say, I get it. That makes sense. Yeah. But it's really, truly, really the apologists for the Novus Ordo really have to really have to stretch their persuasive powers to tell me that if you have the concept of the traditional idea of what the Mass is, and then you go to the Novus Ordo with the drums and stuff, and you can say, is that what that is?
I have to say, and I'm going to get in trouble with my trad friends for saying this, but in about maybe 1 to 5% of the Novus Ordo Masses I've attended, I've gotten something out of it that I didn't get with the Latin Mass. Yeah. However, I'm pretty sure that's because of the particular priest who was saying the Mass, and it had nothing to do with the Mass itself.
Is he not?
And the question becomes like, well, then the Mass is all about the priest, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, possibly, you know. I mean, if he's a good priest, he's going to point you towards God. But yeah, So,
but in that priest mass, you're not going to be finding liturgical dancing, though.
No.
Or did you?
No. They were usually more traditionally minded.
Yeah. Say the black, do the red.
Yeah.
That's what the mass is supposed to be. Even if the idea is it's the personality of the priest or whatever. If you do the Novus Ordo, say the black, do the red, with the ceremonials that you would have at the traditional Latin mass, hey, the normal person won't know the difference, except one is in English, one is in the language Latin.
Right.
Yeah, okay, we can talk about 2 hours more about this.
Yes, we could. I should have cut it short. Trying to get up earlier these days and failing. So, all right. Well, Laurence, thanks so much. This has been long overdue to come back, and here we are. And we had a great conversation. We'll have to do this again sometime, and let me know when you're in Lincoln next.